Welcome back to church. That recap is a reminder of the series that we're in. It's called 7 Habits to Become the Best Version of Yourself. It's all about growing our faith from a new faith or a not even existing yet faith into a fully devoted, steadfast, legacy-building faith. And the hard part about this series is I can teach you all the habits, but it's up to you to apply them. And you come to church for 40 years, learning the Bible verse by verse and learning it so well, but not grow. See, the challenge is really choosing to implement the teachings of Jesus in our life. Your spiritual growth is up to you. And we don't just want to have a shallow church where we learn the Bible. We want you to come and be challenged to change. No matter what you believe, the Word of God can transform your life for the better. And we want you to choose that, to choose to be transformed by what we're talking about. I want to welcome Hebron online, Jasper County Jail, and DeMott Wheatfield. It is good to be here with you this morning. We have talked about in this series wisdom, peacemaking, satisfaction, mission, and last week was just read the instructions. This habit's number 6. And originally last week, I had a great plan for this message, but that plan got super good. I mean, the message was like, wow, this is going to be a really good message, one of my favorite ones I've ever gotten to preach. And I thought, you know what, I want to save it for the finale of this series because next week is Father's Day. I think it's going to be a really important week next week. By the way, Father's Day theme is going to be mullets, mustaches, and men of God. And you'll notice I'm growing a little peach fuzz up here in preparation because I can't just do this in one week. Okay? But it's going to be good. And all men, teenagers, if it's just peach fuzz, don't worry. We don't discriminate against mustaches. We want it here, okay? And you can look at your wife and say, hey, my pastor told me I got to cut a mullet into my hair. You'll be a better lover, better father, better husband if you do that. You know what I mean? Like the power's in the mullet. So anyway, next week is going to be a really special week. I can't wait to celebrate men. And I think we live in a society that really is beating on men these days. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to celebrate mankind. So I really want to encourage you to come next week. Ladies, get your husbands, your men to church. It'll be a really special week. But this week, as I've been praying, there's a message that I've been stewing on and considering doing, and there's multiple parts to it. But this week's message, I've been reading books for and preparing for months, and I think it's time to talk about overcoming narcissism. And the habit to overcome it, we're going to talk about at the end of the message. But I just want to start by talking about overcoming narcissism. I still remember my first ever encounter with someone that I recognized was a real live narcissist. And we're going to change his name. We'll call him DeAndre. And I was at Wheaton College. And this guy was one of those guys, he needed everybody to know that he was the greatest. And he was charismatic, intoxicating. I mean, everybody loved to be around him. When he looked at you, he made you feel like $1 million. His personality was so big. He smelled good. He looked good. He was always on point. He was an athlete. He was a real fire breather. Like actually, he could breathe fire. Like it was a talent that he had, which is not a really useful talent, but unless you need to start a fire, I suppose. But anyway, natural born leader. If he didn't get his way, oh man, you better look out. This guy had no problem watching the world burn. Oh yeah. I remember once he was sweet on this girl, but she liked another guy. And this girl and that other guy would end up getting married. They were both, her and the other guy were pre-med majors and athletes at Wheaton College with no time, but they finally made time to have at Wheaton what we called an RDT, relationship defining talk. And they made time to meet at the Fisher dorm lobby and talk about formally pursuing one another, which was a big deal. You know, the guy would go to the girl, say, hey, I'd like to court you. I'd like to pursue you. You know, maybe they'd ask the father for permission to begin courting the daughter, which was a super Christian-y thing, but that's what we did at Wheaton College. And, you know, it was right before bedtime. We would all go to bed around the same time, about 11:30 in school. It's just the way it worked for us because we were hard workers, whatever else. But DeAndre did not want these two to meet. He was so upset about it. We would learn later that he put a bag of popcorn in a microwave, set the timer for 50 minutes, and walked away. And the fire alarm went off a few minutes later. Right as they were starting their conversation, they had to stop. 700 of us who lived in that dorm had to go outside for 30 minutes while the fire department came and whatever, and the talk couldn't happen. So the couple said, hey, we'll try again next week. We're busy. We only have one time slot that aligns. And DeAndre did the same thing the following week. Okay, put a bag of popcorn in a different microwave this time. In fact, it happened a third time. Except the third time he did something much more heinous to the microwave. I won't say what it was, but it was bad. Finally, the hapless couple was like, dude, we gotta try a different building. So they go to another building. DeAndre found him in that building and set off the fire alarm there as well. And this time he was caught. And I was part of the resident director staff that helped discipline him. And what's amazing is how this guy was totally willing to ruin 700 people's night 3 times in a row, plus the people in the other building, to get what he wanted. And when we busted him, he was, in his mind, the biggest victim you've ever seen. I mean, everybody took advantage of him, and nobody understood his background, and nobody understood how hard his life was. He was incapable of seeing the pain that he caused to other people. Later in life, I would learn to identify DeAndre as a pretty extreme narcissist. Now, a narcissist is a person who has an excessive interest in or admiration of themselves. That's a dictionary definition. But I'll say this, it's less about self-love and more about a sense of self-importance. And this is a term I've started hearing a lot recently. All of us have been hearing the term narcissist. It originated in Greek mythology. It was about a handsome man named Narcissus. Everybody thought he looked good and whatever and had these beautiful eyes. And eventually, he saw his reflection in a pool of water. You know, they didn't have mirrors in the world of antiquity, so he sees himself, and he's so enamored with his own beauty that he leans in to kiss himself in this pool of water, and he drowns, right, in a pool of self-love. And that's the legend. Today, we hear people use the term all the time, in part because we've been inflating words. I mean, any word that is serious gets, he's a bigot, he's a fascist, he's a narcissist, he's a racist, he's a communist. Like we use these terms all the time. What do they even mean? I don't know. But narcissism is actually on the rise big time. The data is crazy. In 1963, just 12% of Americans said yes when asked if they were an important person. 12% of Americans. That sounds about right. In 1992, that number had increased to 80%. Of Americans are like, yeah, I'm a very important person. Today, that number is in the mid-90s, and in parts of the West Coast, surprise, that number is near 100% of people would say I'm an important person. That's a difficult world to be in, and it's an alarming reality, because the fact is, most of us, while important to God, are not actually that important. You know what I mean? Like if we die, the world is gonna move on just fine. Like some people will cry for a day or two, maybe even a couple weeks, and then bam, it's gone. And yet we feel it necessary to tell the whole world what kind of food we're eating for dinner. It's like, why? You know what I mean? Like our prognostications about our life-altering experience in Door County, like everybody must know. And we're shouting over each other at gatherings on Facebook, on whatever, and we're enraged when somebody doesn't give us the dignity we think we deserve. The problem is the dissonance between our belief about our self-importance and the reality of our self-importance. I think it produces a lot of our psychological morbidity. We get depressed, we get insecure because we're an important person. Now, there's some confusion surrounding the term narcissism, and I'd like to provide some clarification. There is something called narcissism personality disorder, also known as NPD, and this is one of 10 actual personality disorders listed in the DSM-5. And like many personality disorders, it's difficult to find treatment for this, and the rate of occurrence is between 2 and 5% of Americans. That's actually held pretty steady. But the way we use the term narcissist is actually much broader. Dr. Craig Malcolm, in his book, Rethinking Narcissism, good book, describes it as a spectrum. And he says, imagine a sliding scale, right? On the one end, we have no self-care. This is bad, this is unhealthy. In the middle, we have a healthy perspective of our own importance. And then on the far end, we have NPD, Narcissism Personality Disorder. The vast majority of the people that we would label narcissists don't actually have NPD. What they have is a sort of lower grade narcissism. They're just very high on the scale. And the actual increase in people with the personality disorder, NPD, that hasn't been that great. But the increase of people who are sliding up the scale is pretty significant. And today, I don't want to focus on people who have actual clinical NPD. I'm not qualified to diagnose that. Today, I want to talk about those of us who are sliding up on the scale. That's growing to a shocking number of people. It's a lot of us. And the core of the problem rests in a need to be recognized because we have a growing sense of self-importance. It's a belief that says, well, I'm destined to do great things. I have a talent that the world must have. I'm very talented. I need to be recognized. And the more we cultivate this, the more we slide up this scale. And the result is an inability or a poor ability to deal with the dissonance between who you are and who you think you should be. And you see, a healthy person, when their expectations about what they're going to do or be are not met, when they miss out on their dreams, they'll say, well, I need to work harder or manage my expectations. That's healthy, right? Oh, I didn't get there. I need to work harder. I need to manage my expectations. Maybe it's not going to happen, whatever. Okay. Someone who is a narcissist will say, I deserve better, I am better, and the world is out to get me. It's their fault, not mine. I've been victimized. The only reason it's their fault, it's not mine. I'm better than this. You see, narcissism doesn't just it's not just a self-love. It also results in a deep insecurity and depression when our expectations about who we are aren't met by society. Narcissism has two major core types, introverted and extroverted. DeAndre, my acquaintance from college, is a classic extroverted narcissist. Winsome, captivating, charismatic, willing to do crazy things to get what you want, manipulate the situation, believe he's gonna be famous, believe he's gonna do all these things with his life, cutting people off when you don't need him anymore, any amount of criticism, fly off the handle, watch the world burn if you don't get what you want. And often this type is more common for men. Introverted narcissists are equally as common, but much less commonly recognized. And they're bitter at the world for not giving them what they think they deserve. Introverted narcissists quietly brood. They're full of envy, scrolling on social media, enraged and depressed at the life they see themselves entitled to, but they don't have. They do a lot of what Dr. Malkin calls pity posting. Introverted narcissists will post something saying, I've had a hard life because of this. Feel sorry for me. And everybody says, you deserve better. And that's exactly what they want to hear. I deserve better because I'm a better person. This type is actually much more common among women than men. Both have an inflated sense of self-importance and entitlement. And they have a huge tendency towards depression when they almost inevitably don't get what they think they deserve. Even though they might have a great life. My life is hard because I deserve better. Now, a lot of you are probably asking, am I a narcissist? And the answer is probably yes and no. You probably don't have NPD on the scale, like on this extreme end, but at different times, places, and spaces in your life, it's likely you might be sliding up on the scale, different areas. On your social media, with a spouse, with a kid, at a workplace. I deserve to be treated better. I've had 2 years of community college and my boss doesn't recognize my talent, whatever it is, right? So I want to do 4 signs that you might struggle a little bit with narcissism. The first one is you are disproportionately crushed and enraged when things don't work out right. Oh, this is the worst day. Normal people, they'd be able to get over it, but for you, oh, it's traumatic. Oh, it's terrible. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do and nobody understands. It's so hard and so difficult. And you will lie, cheat, and steal to make it seem like it's worse than it is or to justify you feeling the way that you do. Number 2, believing that everybody's gonna let you down. I have to carry it. I'm the only one who really does stuff around here. I'm the only one. Everybody rides on my coattails, and it's just the way it is. Number 3, and this is a big one, envy. A narcissist will claim to love people, but if someone they love gets something that they want, like a son gets something that you want, rather than being happy for that son, you'll be angry. You'll be upset that they have it. I deserve it. I'm envious. And it's hard to actually love people because you love yourself so much. And the fourth one, as I can count, is difficulty admitting that you're wrong. See, you're able to see other people's roles and other people's fault, but you can't really see your own because you're a good person. I'm a good person. It's not really my fault. Everybody, you don't understand, Pat. Everybody's kind of taken advantage of me my whole life. A narcissist will seek to be understood. You need to understand my pain and my feelings and my thoughts, but you won't make a big effort to understand people around you. Because it's really their fault. What's to understand? They're the perpetrator of my pain, right? Why do I want to understand? That's classic narcissism. Now, if you personally relate to a lot of these things, you're probably pretty high on the spectrum in some areas in your life. Now, one exception, there's probably some of you here today, you're hearing this and you're like, oh man, everybody in my life is a narcissist. My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my kids, my coworkers, everybody's a narcissist. And that's the last thing I gotta mention is classic narcissist behavior is projecting your own faults on everybody else around you because you have no way to explain them. So you explain them by saying it's everybody else's fault. They're the ones who have my fault. Right? And that's pretty common for extreme narcissists. And if you think that, you're probably on the extreme end. Now, why is a pastor talking so much about narcissism? And I'll tell you, because it is the original sin. The sin that started all sin is narcissism. The devil, Satan, was created by God originally without sin. Ezekiel talks about this. It says, I ordained and anointed you as the mighty angelic guardian, not human, but an angel. You had access to the holy mountain of God and you walked among the stones of fire. Lucifer was the angel of light created by God, blameless, second among all created things, behind only the Trinity. In the next verse, he says, you were blameless in all you did from the day you were created. Okay, perfect, without sin, not human, until the day evil was found in you, your heart was filled with pride because of all your beauty. Oh, it's a self-love. It's an overassessment of self-importance. It's narcissism. Your wisdom was corrupted by your love of splendor. What caused Lucifer, the devil, to rebel against God? It was an overassessment of his self-importance. It was pride and narcissism. I'll show you in another passage. Isaiah talks about it. It says, how you are fallen from heaven, O shining star of the son of the morning. You have been thrown down to earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I'll be above God. I'm that important. Nobody sees how important I am except myself. I, Lucifer, must, okay? He says, I will preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. The original sin, the first sin, was narcissism. Overassessment of self-importance. It was the fundamental first sin that came even before creation. All other sins, I believe, are rooted in this. Lust, greed, adultery, theft. Well, they worked for it, but I should have it. I deserve it. I shouldn't have to. I'm better than other people. Every other sin is born from this one. The devil, before Adam and Eve, sinned through narcissism. And when you read Genesis 3, what does the serpent use to tempt Adam and Eve? You could be like God if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it is so destructive. I mean, some of you might not see it. You know, what's wrong with self-love? Our society has been trained to love thyself. Just love yourself. It destroys relationships. Narcissists can't actually love people or have deep relationships with people because you just use people to love yourself more. You don't actually love people. You can't actually care for people altruistically. It robs you of all close relationships. More significantly, narcissism prevents you from growth. When you slide up the scale and you get into this danger zone right here, you lose the ability to grow as a person because you start to see yourself as perfect. So why would I need to change? Right? I love myself so much you can't receive any criticism. As soon as you get criticism, you're stunned and upset. How dare you talk to me? It's not my fault. I'm the one who's actually victimized. They can't receive any of it. By a refusal to see your own faults, you can't grow. And we all know that person, you know. At 15 years, they're the most popular, they're the captain, they're so successful. Everybody admires and respects and adores them. But then you see them again at 45 and there is no change. Classic example, Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, right? I mean, here's this guy, he's never changed. And we all know those people in your minds like, man, they're still driving the T-Bird with the T-top singing, take me down to the Paradise City. Well, like what in the world? Like we have moved on, right? There's what in the world? But in the end, narcissism is a highway to loneliness, depression, and anxiety. When you can't grow, when you can't change, and you blame everyone around you from your problems, you will end up alone and disappointed. It's the highway of narcissism. The end result is feelings of betrayal and victimhood. It's a miserable place to be, and this is America today. You don't need to be a Christian to see it. You see it in our society. This fundamental sin robs us of joy, robs us of relationship, robs us of satisfaction, robs us of personal growth. We're stunted, blaming it's their fault, on the right, on the left, it's their fault. This epidemic of self-importance has been brought about by a rise in social media, a rise in the self-esteem movement, and specifically a fall in the influence of Christianity in the West. We have a whole population that cannot grow. And the end result is miserable loneliness. Jesus came as the answer to narcissism. He came to deal with the sin in the world. Why? Because he loves us and he knows how miserable sin makes us. All sin leads to broken relationships. And Jesus came as a solution to this. Now think about this. Jesus is the only person who couldn't be a narcissist. I mean, he is so important, he can't overestimate his own importance. Right? He laid the foundations of the earth as the angels rejoiced. Calmed the wind and the waves, had tens of thousands of people following him. He shook the foundations of the Roman Empire. And he said this in his Sermon on the Mount: God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And then in the NIV it says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. In a world of antiquity, narcissism was the way. Rich, powerful people love themselves. It was all about themselves. Enslave others. Take from others. Love yourself. Serve yourself. The world was a miserable place. And Jesus came and said, let meekness reign. I've got a new teaching. I'm going to turn the world on the head. And narcissism is so rampant, we don't even know what its opposite, what its antonym is. But the antonym of narcissism is meekness. Meekness. The habit of meekness. And this biblical concept is a rich, meaningful concept. What meekness is, I mean, most of us don't even know. It is a willing submission to people in our life. Saying we're going to serve other people with no expectation of anything in return. It's similar to humility, but it's different. It's a willing submission to God as an authority. It's a willing, loving sacrifice, giving your life to others with no expectation of anything in return. And it is the cure to the great problem of narcissism. Jesus expands on it at the Last Supper, talking to his disciples. He says, in this world, the kings and great men lord it over other people. They all try to be great. They all want people to give them accolades and tell them how great they are and, all this stuff, right? Yet they're called friends of the people. But among you, among Christians, it's going to be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank. And the leader should be like a servant. What? Who is more important, the one who sits at the head of the table or the one who serves? Well, it's the one who sits at the table, of course, but not here. Not among Christians, for I am among you, Jesus says, as one who serves. Radical, radical. These teachings were reversing the sin of Satan. Jesus came to reset the world order. Instead of self-promotion, self-importance, and self-love, Jesus came in meekness. And he's calling us to meekness, not because he wants us to miss out, but because he loves us. Do you want a better life? Do you want satisfaction? Do you want joy? Do you want deeper, richer relationships? Practice the habit of meekness. Because he knows that the race for self-importance is a bottomless pit of misery. Some of you know exactly what that feels like. You're here today and you're like, Pastor, I've been chasing after this self-importance my whole life, and no matter how much I get, I'm never satisfied. Meekness leads to a love of others, an inclusion of others, and deep, rich relationships. And his teaching, as it spread to the whole world, changed the world. For the first time, human life was valued universally. No longer was it male or female, slave or free, red, brown, yellow, black, and white. Instead, we were all one in Christ Jesus, all precious in his sight. It was about human beings made in the image of God now. And as we watch society back away from what Jesus teaches in meekness, we see a return to our sinful nature, the first sin, pride and narcissism. And you don't need to be a Christian to see it. Like, we see this. How many days have you taken to love yourself? I don't need to be a doormat anymore. I'm going to love others more, and I'm going to take care of myself and whatever. And listen, where does this lead the world? To a bottomless pursuit of more self-importance that never satisfies. It never fulfills. You keep filling this void, and it's never full. And what do we have? An endless conga line of the most successful people on earth. I'm like about to walk in a conga line, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. That's not going to go well. It's going to be embarrassing. We have a conga line of successful people, presidents, athletes, movie stars, Will Smith, and they feel like victims. Oh, the world's taking advantage of them. They don't get treated right. They can never apologize. They blame others for their problems. They should be happy, but narcissism leads to misery. So what should we do? How do we deal with this? The answer is meekness, the habit of meekness. The cure for narcissism in our life is meekness by submitting to Jesus. It begins by admitting, I am a sinner. This is so important. You cannot get over narcissism without Jesus. And what I love is there are not many effective treatments for narcissism, but Christianity is an effective treatment. It is the cure. Asking God to forgive you and lead you, submitting to his authority rather than your own, and then daily pursuing a relationship with Jesus is the habit of meekness, and that is what cures it. It's not some religious word salad. It did sound like a word salad, I get it, but this is a process with a proven track record of success. Christianity ended the barbarity of narcissism in the world of antiquity, and it replaced it with life-changing, life-giving meekness. And as a Christian, meekness isn't something you do once when you become a Christian. It is a habit, a condition of your life that you live in daily. And I practice meekness by doing 5 things. 5 simple things that we do daily. The first thing is admit that you're a sinner daily. I love what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 10:15. He says, I take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Every thought. Look, there's some days go by where I'm like, not outwardly super sinful. You know what I mean? I'm not driving by people in my barely running Suburban giving people the finger. You know what I mean? I'm not like committing crimes all the time. You know what I mean? Or well, hopefully not ever, but you know, but I'm committing sin in my heart, right? And the first sin I commit is I deserve better. I deserve better. I mean, that's whatever. And I shouldn't be treated this way. And when look, there's a time to say that's wrong. I'm not going to allow that. But when you start thinking I am entitled to, I'm entitled to this better thing, that's what justifies theft. That's what justifies starting a road rage incident. That's what justifies all these sinful behaviors, and it makes you miserable. But when I confess my sin to God, and instead of placing blame on others, place blame on myself, there's freedom, there's joy. Life is better. The second thing is I ask for forgiveness from God and from people. Let me explain. When I hurt Kristen, I have to understand her before I ask for forgiveness. Saying sorry is easy. Oh, sorry. But when you ask for forgiveness, implicit within that is actually taking the time to understand how you've hurt the other person. It's easy for me to look at Kristen and try to shut her up by saying sorry. That's like saying shut up, shut your mouth. I don't want to hear it, right? But when I say, will you forgive me, that implies that I sat down to let her explain to me in agonizingly slow, real-time, sometimes longer than real-time detail, the whole litany of how I've hurt her feelings, which I am shocked. There are a lot of feelings there. I didn't know that until I married a woman, but I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And my tendency is to want to run away. You know what I mean? Like, oh my goodness, can I just, I'm sorry, I get it. Look, I made you unhappy or whatever. Like, please, no. Meekness is allowing her to express her full self to me and me humbly submitting, listening to her talk, understanding what she says, then taking the time to, in painstaking detail, verbalize it back to her in a way that connects with her, and then saying, will you forgive me? That's meekness. And in doing that, what am I doing? I'm taking the spotlight of importance off of me. I'm fighting narcissism. I'm overcoming it, saying, you know what? I'm gonna practice meekness and submit myself to her. Number 3, this is a big one. Serve quietly with no strings. I think that in society, it is hard for us to serve others without the expectation of praise in return. And Jesus talks about this. He says, but when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. And listen, giving is a good thing. Jesus isn't saying giving, and look, if you want to give for praise, that's fine. The problem is, in our heart, it doesn't do anything. When you give for praise, it doesn't fight the sin of narcissism. But Jesus says, if you really want to love others, if you want to really experience satisfaction in life, when you give humbly and privately, there's a satisfaction that will begin to bloom in your life as you begin to recognize others are truly important instead of giving so that you're important. And I see it all the time, like #humbled to be such a successful person. #humbled to be such a good husband. I'm just the best there is. That's all there is. #humbled to have run such a great business, blah, 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 blah. And look, that's fine. He's not even saying that's sinful. It's just if you want to fight narcissism in your life, it begins with doing stuff for others without expecting anything in return, sometimes even in secret. Number 4, give thanks and compliments. I always say this, unexpressed gratitude is ingratitude. Some of you say, I'm a grateful person, I just don't say it. No. If you don't express it, you are ungrateful. You're an ungrateful person. You cannot be grateful without telling people that you're grateful. And when you say thank you, what you're doing is you're taking the spotlight off your heart and you're placing it on someone else. So many people sit at home all day saying, I wish someone would notice me. I wish someone would give compliments. My wife used to say that at night. I wish people would notice. I'm like, Kristen, send 30 text messages out telling people how much you appreciate them. You treat others the way you want to be treated. You know what? She feels so much better when she does it. She gives compliments. I've got a friend in my life, every time I talk with him, he tells me how great I am. And I know, I appreciate it, but I know that God is blessing him when he does it. Give thanks, give compliments, and you will deal with narcissism in your heart. Number 5, this is a big one. This is an important one. It's my favorite one. Seek improvement opportunities. You seek out negative parts about yourself. Ask someone that you trust that is godly, and this is such a big deal. And this question I'm about to say is not written down anywhere. It's not in the discussion questions. You're just gonna need to memorize it. But you find somebody that you respect who is godly, and you say, what is the worst part about me that I don't see but everybody else sees? What is the worst part about me? What part of my behavior? How does my breath stink? And I don't know. Like, you tell me what it is that's bad about me. And this is such a big deal, right? You're admitting, hey, look, I'm imperfect. I know there's an improvement opportunity there. And listen, I know a lot of you guys are like, oh, Lord, please don't let my wife ask me that question. It's a trap. And ladies, don't make it a trap. Okay? You just receive it, because what we do, and it's so tempting. I asked this question to Elise this week, and she was at work, she gave me an answer. My immediate thing was to be like, that's not true for this reason, this reason, this reason. It's like, wait a minute, stop. What are you doing, John? Just receive it. One of the biggest costs of narcissism is not growing. And so many people, as we creep up this spectrum in life, and that's what happens when you get older. You get more successful, you get wealthier, you got everyone around you who kind of, they respect you and whatever else, and you stop getting improvement opportunities and you stop growing. I know some older people, they have been dynamic and growing their whole life because they have opened up their life to criticism and improvement opportunities. Who in your life, when was the last time somebody came to you and said, hey, this thing that you do was not okay? And you're like, thank you, I'll change that, right? Somebody that's close to you. I mean, often in our life, it's really difficult to receive that. Humble yourself, level up. Several years ago, a big magazine contacted me to say that our church was among the 100 fastest growing churches in the country. And the lady on the phone talked about how my leadership was the key. She said, it's probably because of you as pastor. And I was like, my leadership has been the key to making our church one of the fastest growing churches in the country. And that night I went home and, I opened up the door to my home, entered like this, and I said, hello, family. One of the most effective pastors in the country has just walked in this door. What's funny is that night, my wife, I don't think she knew how lucky she was to be married to a guy like me. I mean, look at this. Look at this mustache. You know what I mean? I'm something. And I was so frustrated with her because I wasn't being treated the way I felt I deserved. What's interesting is that confidence boost, what it did was it robbed me of joy. It robbed me of satisfaction. I slid up that scale of narcissism. I was mad at everybody. I was depressed. People didn't see how I didn't enjoy work as much. I didn't enjoy my friends as much. I was much less happy. I was more insecure. So they called me up to have me give an interview. You know what I mean? So I give this interview to the magazine about my leadership secrets. Here's what I did and whatever else. And the truth is I did very little. This church, you guys lit the way and cleared the path for me. You guys are the ones who do it. I mean, it amazes me. For 129 years, this church has been honoring God. I've only led it for 8. I can't take credit for this. And the article gets published, and I was in the DeMott Elementary School parking lot. Actually, I was on the playground, but because of this phone call, I had to run in my car. But this old mentor and his wife totally ripped me apart. I'm thankful for the way God's used this couple in my life. There have been a few times. They have said the harshest things to me in my life. Nobody said harsher things to me. And they ripped me a new one. And at first I was denying it, right? And I was lying to myself. I wasn't lying to them. I was lying to all of us. I like truly deceived myself and I would never say that. And they're reading my own words back to me. And I was like, I actually did say that. I can't believe it. It's embarrassing. And I called the magazine. I said, hey, look, you got to change this article. I lied. I sinned. I don't know how I got there. And I asked my old mentor for forgiveness. I asked some others for forgiveness. I humbled myself. I practiced meekness. And you know what? It was like so relieving. It was freeing. And from that day, some of you guys will remember the season that this happened. I started saying, pastors come and go, but a church is for the generations. That's where that phrase come from that day. You know what? I started really seeing how little I'd done and how much God had done. And through this habit of meekness, you know what happened? My marriage got better. I mean, how much better is it to be married to somebody you feel fortunate to be with rather than being married to someone you feel like they're fortunate to be with you? It's like, man, that's a much better perspective. Thank you, Jesus, for meekness. My life was better. I enjoyed my kids more. I enjoyed my job more. I enjoyed every part of my life more because of meekness. Instead of feeling like a victim, instead of feeling taken advantage of. And I just think there might be some of you today. It's not awesome to say, you know what, I'm a sinner with a tendency towards narcissism. But when you do, you're going to find freedom. Jesus wasn't kidding when he said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the kingdom of God. He wanted freedom for you and freedom for me. He wanted us to have better, deeper, richer, more meaningful relationships. He wanted us to have better lives where we could grow, change, and improve. He didn't want the peak of our life to be when we're 15 years old like Uncle Rico. He wanted us to have joy and satisfaction and meaningful relationships. And I hope today that somebody might be like, hey, this message isn't a message I'm hoping so-and-so is listening to. This is a message for me. I want to deal with the original sin in my life. God, forgive me. I am a sinner in need of grace. Help me walk in meekness every day. I want to challenge you to walk in meekness. Now, I've got some discussion questions. You can do them by yourself. You can do them as a group, but here's the QR code, the secret code that you shine your phone on, and it just like turns into a link that you click on that'll take you to our discussion questions. Based on the 4 signs talked about, do you struggle with narcissism? And I just want you to admit it. In this area of my life, I do. In this area of my life, I do, right? Okay? How have you seen narcissism robbing you your life of contentment? And I really want you to list it out. I can think of the different ways narcissism has robbed my life of contentment. Here's what it's done. Here's what it's cost me. Count the cost. Is this worth it? No. And then number 3, what do you need to do to start overcoming narcissism this week? Let's practice the habit of meekness together. As we close, please stand to your feet at all of our locations, and let's have a prayer. God in heaven, I thank you that you love us so much. You lay out a plan for our life that leads to life satisfaction. God, I lift up every person hearing my voice, skeptics, sinners, longtime Christians. Would you show us parts of our life where the sin of narcissism has robbed us of relationship, of joy, of connection? And God, by your Spirit, would you show us places in our life where we've been living this way and give us the courage, discipline, and humility to admit that we've been living apart from what you have for us. And God, would you make our church different, a place where people, instead of choosing narcissism, choose meekness. Would you make our community one that brings glory to you and to people around us out of love for one another? I ask this in Jesus' name. All God's people said, amen and amen. Let's sing this last song together, guys.